So, does anyone know what the word congruent means? Robert?
Equal.
Equal. What were you going to say? Equal. Anyone want to build on equal?
The same.
The same. Okay. It's a different verb or different word. Okay, anyone else want to build on what it might mean to be congruent figures? So if congruent means equal or same, what does it mean to be congruent figures? They're the same figure. Okay, what were you going to say, Robert?
They're like identical, or like they add up to the same thing.
Okay, they add up to the same thing, getting closer. Anyone else think they have a way that we can identify congruent figures? Chase? No? Congruent figures are figures that have the same shape and size. Okay, so if we can have two triangles, but they might not always have the same shape and size. So to be congruent, they have to have the same shape and size. So let's go ahead and I'm going to draw two triangles. And I'm going to try to draw them so they look like they might be congruent. I'm going to call the first one ABC and the second one X, Y, and Z. Okay, so if we think about what it means to be the same shape and size, this side right here, what do we call that side? Remember how we talk about sides? Side AB. Okay, so side AB, or you could say BA. If I said that was a length of 5, and these are supposed to be congruent, which one do you think would also be 5? XY. Okay, if I said BC was 9, which other side should be 9? YZ. And if I said XZ was 4, actually that can't happen. If I said it was 3, nope, that can't happen either. Sorry. We'll learn why it can't happen later. We'll get there. 6. There's a rule that tells you what the lengths have to be, which is something we learn a little bit later. So if that's 6, then what does AC have to be?
6.
So one of the things that we do with congruent, when we know figures are congruent, we know that corresponding sides are also congruent. So in our assignment today, and we're going to do a couple examples, in our pictures, if we know that these figures are congruent, then we can start setting like sides equal to one another to solve for X and Y. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to look at, angle B. What does it match with? Angle Y. What about angle X? Angle A. And what about angle C? Angle Z. Okay, have you guys seen these markings before on pictures? Anyone never seen them at all? Okay, so we know that 1 marks correspond with 1 mark, 2 with 2, 3 with 3. So what I want to do real quick is take some practice in writing what's called the congruence statement. When you're writing the congruent statement, do you guys all know what this symbol means? That's the symbol for congruent. It's an equal sign with a little squiggly line on top. When we're writing a congruent statement, you need to match all the letters in one triangle with the corresponding letters in the other triangle. So if I start with ABC, what did A match with? X. So that means X has to go first. Since B is second, what matched with B? Y. And then lastly, C matches with Z. So because we write these congruent statements to match the triangles up, if we have a congruent statement with no markings, we can use the statement to now mark the picture. So we use it to go both ways, whether we have a picture and write the statement, or we have a statement and we draw it on the picture. So here's our first example, and again we're going to draw two triangles. So I'm going to again start with triangle ABC. And then I'm also going to go with X, Y, and Z. And I'm going to tell you that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle XYZ. So here in this one, we don't have any markings whatsoever on the picture. So this is where we have to use our congruent statement to mark the picture. And this happens a lot more than you think, where we have a statement but nothing drawn on the picture. So let's fill in our picture with our tick marks. Anyone think they know where we can put something that's congruent? Robert and then Chase.
A is congruent to X, so you put one mark on A and one mark on X.
So A and X, because again, A is first and X is first, so they are congruent. Chase, what's another one?
B is congruent to Y.
B comes second, so it's congruent to Y. And we'll mark that with 2 arcs in the angle. Okay, anyone else think they know another one? Maddie?
C is congruent to 3.
C and Z, they both come third, so I'll put 3 little arcs. Okay, so those are our 3 angles. So angle A was congruent to angle X. Angle B was congruent to angle Y. X got cut off there. That's not cute at all. And then lastly, angle C was congruent to angle Z. So we have the angles. What about the sides? Can anyone tell me a pair of congruent sides? Okay. Chase?
AB is congruent to XY.
AB is congruent to XY. Now if you look, see how AB are together, are the first 2? They would have to match up with the first 2 over here. So AB is congruent to XY. What's another one? Max, do you think you know one? Do you see any 2 letters next to each other in the statement?
YZ.
So YZ, so those were the last 2, right? So what are the last 2 over here?
BC.
So that means it goes with BC. So we have BC is congruent to YZ. So I can put 2 marks on that one. Now we need one more. Let's see. Abby, do you think you can do the last one? AC and xz. Okay, any questions about how we use the statement to fill in the marks for the picture? So again, xz were the outside two, the first and the last, so they go with the first and the last of the other statement. So it's all about just matching up like pieces. So the first part of your assignment is going to just be asking you to list out congruent sides and congruent angles based on a picture and a statement. So pretty much what we did right here is what the first like 4 or 5 questions are asking you to do. Okay, the next example is another type that is going to be asked of you, and that is where they give you a picture. So we're going to draw a picture. I'll talk you through this one because this one can get a little weird to draw. So I draw a vertical line, then I'm going to draw a horizontal line that's kind of long, and then I'm going to draw another vertical line going down. Lastly, so it's almost like you're drawing stairs. Lastly, connect this top one with this bottom one. And you should see 2 triangles. So then we put our labels on it, and I'm going to tell you that T and Q are 90 degrees. And here's what the question will ask you. Are the 2 triangles congruent? So what we're going to try to figure out is, do we have enough information to say, yes, these triangles are the same shape, same size? Or do we not know enough information to say that? So to be able to answer this, you have to be able to say all 6 of these to be able to say a figure's congruent. Okay? So I usually pick one to start with. So I'm going to pick angles. Let's see if we can say that we have angles congruent. Do we know any angles are congruent based on our picture? Yes, which one? Okay, T and Q. 90-degree angles are all the same, or are all congruent. So we know that angle T is congruent to angle Q. Is there a second angle that might not be marked, but we know it's congruent based on an angle pair relationship? Chase?
Angle QRP is congruent to angle TRS.
Okay, so QRP, so that's this one right here, is congruent to TRS, this one right here. What kind of angles are those? What's the angle pair relationship that lets us say those are congruent? Rosemary? Okay, they're vertical angles. So if you want to make a note there for yourself, that's why we were able to say that. Okay, anything else we can say is congruent based with the angles? Can we say S and P are congruent? You're saying yes. Why do you think S and P are congruent? It just looks like they are.
They're vertical from each other.
These two they're actually not vertical, because vertical they actually have to have a point that they share. So they're not quite vertical. But we do have, they should be, right? It looks like they should be. If this is 90 and this is 90, and we know, let's say this is 20 and this is 20, what do we know about triangles on the inside? They all add up to 180. So if both of these triangles have 110 degrees accounted for, What do we know about these two? They both have to be 70, right? So we have this theorem, so where we can say angle S is congruent to angle P. It's called the third angle theorem. And what the third angle theorem says, if two angles are congruent, then the third angle has to also be congruent. Okay, so you're right, it does look like it, and we actually have a theorem that lets us say once we know two angles are congruent, then the third one has to be. Okay, so we're able to list all three angles congruent, but we also have to look at the sides. So let's look at the sides next. Do we know anything about the sides being congruent? Do we have any markings whatsoever that tell us the sides are congruent? Huh? QPR. Okay, but vertical applies to angles, not sides. So is there any way we can say ST and QP are the same length? Is that noted anywhere in the picture? No. Can we say that SR and RP are congruent? No. So right here from the sides, we know nothing about the sides and their lengths to be able to say that they're congruent. So the sides are a big question mark. We don't know enough information. So because of this, we would say not congruent, not enough info. So when you come to you do have, I think it's like 3 of these, where you're going to be given a picture and you want to try to find the 3 angles and all 3 sides. If there's something you can't find, like let's say you couldn't only figure out 5 of the things, then you don't have enough information. You have to find all 6 to be able to say that they are congruent.
Miss Thomas still needs 3 books.
They're over there in the cupboard, or and look for the ones that say volume 1. I told her I had 3. They should be over in the cupboard. Okay, any questions on that? Because it's a little bit of a longer process because we're looking for 6 different things. You got to read, it says V1 or V2 on the binding. You want the ones that say V1.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. We're going to do one more of these where we're going to be trying to see if the triangles are congruent. So I'm going to flip the page and we're going to draw 2 more. Do you guys know what a parallelogram is or a quadrilateral is? Anyone not know what that is? Okay, a quadrilateral is a 4-sided figure. We're going to draw something that's a 4-sided figure here. We're going to do a whole unit on quadrilaterals in about a month and a half. So for right now, start by drawing a horizontal line. And then below it, I'm going to start another horizontal line, but you see how I'm starting it a little to the left? And I'm going to try to make it as close to the same length as possible. Then I'm going to connect the 2 left endpoints and the 2 right endpoints. And lastly, I'm going to connect the diagonal going from the bottom left to the top right. And then I'm going to make some markings. And we're again going to be asked, are they congruent? So again, I'm going to start with the angles. Which angles do I know are congruent based on the picture? Okay, A and C. Now, because A, do you see how A is both in this triangle up here and this one down here? We want to use 3 letters for our angles. And the last one, example, where we only had, like S was the only vertex and P was the only vertex, and same with Q and T. If you have a letter that belongs in both triangles, because we have triangle ABC and we have triangle ADC, you want to use 3 letters to help you differentiate the two angles. So when you say A and C, are you talking about the 1 marking or the 2 marking? 1. So we would want to use 3 letters, B, A, C. And then D, C, A. Because those are both talking about the angles with 1 marking. What's another one that we know? DAC, so now you're looking at the 2 marking, is congruent to angle BCA. Okay, do we know anything so these were both based on the markings that we knew those. What about the final angle, B and D? Are those congruent? Think about the theorem we just used for angles in the last one. Okay, they are congruent, and by what we called that 3rd angle theorem. So we've shown all 3 angles are congruent. So now let's look at the sides. Can we show all the sides are congruent? So on this one, do we know anything about sides that might be the same length based on the markings in the picture? B and C with AD. Okay, those both had 2 markings on them. What's another one? So that one we knew by its markings. CD and BA. Again, because of the markings. What about the 3rd side of each triangle? AC. So AC belongs both in this triangle up here and this triangle down here. So can we say that AC is congruent to itself? Does anyone remember the property that lets us say that? Think a mirror.
Symmetric.
Not symmetric. You're on the right. It's close though. Think a mirror. Reflexive. So whenever you're saying something's congruent to itself, think of looking in a mirror. It's the reflexive property. So were we able to say all 3 angles and all 3 sides are congruent? Yes. So then we can say triangle ABC is congruent to triangle, and now we just got to match up the correct letters. So in this top triangle, A has 1 mark, so what does it match with in this triangle? C. And then B will match with D. And lastly, C, the double, will match with A, the double. So this would be your congruence statement at the very end. Okay, so like I was saying, on your assignment, you do have about 3 of these where you're going to be going through this process just to see, are they congruent? The last 2 types that you're going to have, you're going to be told that these are congruent. So it's going to tell you that triangle X, Y, Z and triangle DEF are congruent. And then it's going to ask you to solve for the variable or variables. Did you already know the answers? Yeah. Okay.
Would you like us to do the proofs as well?
We're getting there. We're not there yet. Anyone think they know how to solve for X and Y? Or even just one of them? Samantha, what do you think? How might we solve for X or Y?
Can you like add all of them and put them into one unit?
Okay, if we knew all 3 angles of the triangle, so I know this is 30, this is 90, I can figure this one out by doing that.
90 and 30 and subtract from 1 unit.
Okay, so that'll give me 60 for this angle right here.
Wait, is that 9 or 90?
The right angle is always 90. Okay, so that did help me find this, but how is that helping me find Y or X? Robert?
Well, the 30 is equal to the other side. The 2y, you set them equal to each other if you're congruent.
Actually, I just realized I wrote this wrong. This should be FED. Okay, so based on the congruent statement, do you see how Z and D are both at the end? That means these are the 2 angles that need to match up to be congruent. So that means we would be able to say 30 has to equal to Y. So we can solve for Y by dividing both sides by 2 to get Y is 15. So using that same idea, well, how can we find X? What does it pair with? It pairs with 9 because X, Y are the first 2, FE are the first 2. So that means these have to be the same. So 9 equals 3X. And then we can divide by 3 to get X is 3. So you're going to have some where you want to use the congruent statement to match up the parts so you can write an equation. So if we needed to find 60, then what we did to find 60 would help us, then we could do that as well. Okay, the last kind is like 4 but without a picture. Okay, the last 2 that you're going to do on your assignment is just going to give you a congruent statement, and then it's going to tell you that the measure of one angle, in this case F, is equal to something, and it's going to tell you that the measure of angle Q is equal to something, and in this case it's 3x, and it's going to say solve for x and the angles. So that means we need to know what does x equal, what is angle F, and what is angle Q. So the last kind you have is going to give you the same thing but without the picture. So how do we go about trying to do this, finding x as well as the angles without a picture? Just a sec, guys, I want to give people a chance to finish writing. Malka, what do you think?
I have no idea.
Okay, so let me ask you this. What does the congruent statement tell us?
That two are the same.
Okay. Anything else that you remember it tells us? Okay, Robert, what else does the congruent statement tell us?
Equal.
Okay, it does tell us that they're equal. But the statement itself, how can we use that? That's the question. Chase?
Since triangle FGH is congruent to triangle QRS, that means angle F would has to be congruent to angle Q, which means 3x equals x plus 5.
Okay, perfect. So, in a congruent statement, it does tell us that the triangles are the same. But it also tells us which angles of the triangle go together. So because F and Q are both first, that means those are the two angles that have to equal each other. G would have to equal what? R, and S has to equal H. So when we don't have a picture, we need to use the statement to make sure we're matching up equal parts correctly. So because F and Q have to equal one another, we can set the two expressions equal and then solve for x. And when we do that, we end up with x equals 12. And then to be able to find angle F, we're going to plug 12 in for x. So what is 12 plus 24? 36. And then just to make sure, plug it in for q. So what's 3 times 12? 36. Should we be getting the same number out? Yes, because according to the congruent statement, they're supposed to be equal.